Hello again, everyone. I hope, unlike last time, my mic is on this time, which I believe it is. But yeah, so welcome again to another installment of the Summer of Nix public lecture series, 2022, of course. I quickly, like always, want to take a small minute to thank the people that made it happen, which of course are the NLnet Foundation, the European Commission, the NixOS Foundation, and Tweag. Again, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat, whichever platform you're on, be it LinkedIn, be it YouTube, be it the Oncast instance. And I do hope you enjoy this one, because I'm looking forward to having Domen talk about a very bold claim of Nix going mainstream, which, just to be clear, I also believe it's going mainstream. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. And without much further ado, I'll pull Domen in here and I'll let him talk about the rest. So enjoy.
All right, thank you so much. I'm here in northern Spain in a hotel room. So it's crazy to see that we've come this far that one can give a talk in such conditions. Yeah, I would like to talk about a topic that kind of came to my focus 4 years ago, and you can see on this picture me driving through the northern Thailand. Just a bit of a story intro. And I was listening to two books that I'll show, and they kind of changed my mindset back then when I was consulting and helping clients use Nix. And after this trip of writing for 2 weeks, I kind of started. This was actually after I started the cache experiment, as I called it back then. Yeah, I kind of decided that well, that based on these two books that I'll just briefly mention, that I want to give myself a mission to see if we can bring Nix to everyone and not just enjoy it in the inner circles or whatever you want to call that. So the first book is Man's Search for Meaning, which kind of talks about psychology of human motivation, and it talks about the Holocaust and how some people survived and some didn't, and what was the kind of the psychological difference going in those people's minds going through the great suffering. And a lot of our today's psychology, well, it's kind of like a niche, well, as a part of psychology that's brought us a lot of interesting bits, and it talks about that everybody needs to have a cause in their life. And the second book is Crossing the Chasm, which talks about technology adoption and how technology goes through different stages. And it's kind of connected in my mind that Nix was back then in very early adopter stage, and a lot of problems we were having are very well described in this book, as without talking about Nix specifically, but just talking about technology and adoption. So yeah, listening to these books while driving through Thailand inspired me to go on this quest. And also I wanted to give this talk every year, but well, COVID happened, so here we are 3-4 years later, depending on how you count. So I just want to go right in. If you look at how, well, one of the ways how kind of like innovation or evolution went, we went through operating systems to VMs, and then containers happened. And we're kind of if you look at this path, I think we're kind of going more granular. OS was big thing. Now you can have multiple VMs, and now containers are even thinner. And the question is, kind of what's next? Is there something that's next? And I've put closures here because I think that's the closest thing that I can say, some kind of very fine granular look at how we look at an application, a running software, whatever you want to call it. And Nix kind of fits this picture. On the other hand, if we zoom into the containers evolution, this is very, very simplified and also a bit wrong, but just for the sake of this presentation. We kind of started with LXC, which was kind of like one of the first sane but very low level interfaces. And then Docker came as a company who kind of said, okay, LXC is great technology, very well designed, but we need a nice interface. We need something simple. We need something that we can kind of give to 1,000, 10,000, millions of developers. And after that, Kubernetes kind of came and took this technology and built a lot of the stuff on top of what Docker brought us. Again, simplified view, but when I think if we look at Nix, I see a lot of similarities, especially reading the Crossing the Chasm book. It's kind of like this very solid foundation that we have, but there's like this Docker bit missing, and a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the developer experience missing. And I think this is kind of like the transition period we are right now. I'll talk later about what I think is happening, what I think will happen. But my point of this talk will be that this transition period is in full swing, and I'm really excited to see how it will play out. So the nice folks at Flux, mainly led by Ron, made a Nix survey this year. You can read about this more on Discord. And it's really interesting just to see the data, and I think there was like 2,000 answers, so pretty wide range, although we believe that there's many, many more Nix users out there. And well, if there's one thing to take away from this talk is this: over 30% of the people who actually answered that survey, which again could be biased, have joined in the last year, which is a lot, which is a very, very big growth, and it's going to be interesting to see the numbers next year and to compare if this number will be as big as it is. So I think this is one of the evidences we can collect to say that people are coming into Nix, and we've seen in the previous year talks about pull request growth, GitHub use growth, Nix being one of the most active and trending projects on GitHub even. But this is even more precise. And one of the interesting takeaways from that survey as well, at least for me, was that, well, everyone uses Nix for developer environments. It's this easiest entry point for Nix. And I think there was many talks about this, like Jonas had a talk many years ago, probably like 5, how, Nix Shell is kind of like this sneaky way to get Nix into any project and any team, and kind of show how powerful, how simple this file can be, but how much pain it can move away from a team, especially using different OSs and different Linux distributions and so on. And kind of like the last thing that I noticed is, well, there are many bits to this survey, but this could be probably a separate talk. But is that 27% of Nix users do use macOS as their main OS, and if you compare that to the statistics of like professional developers, it's quite low. So it's also interesting to see that we are kind of like not on pair with the statistics of the general developers share of the OSs. So that kind of shows that there's something wrong there. So I think the main thing that's missing in Nix is developer experience. As I mentioned previously, we have a very, as I said, very good foundation in Nix. But what we're missing to go from this group of enthusiasts who are willing to spend hours and hours to play with Nix and figure out how it works, and they see the core of it, and bringing to the mainstream to let's say any developer that can just learn and start easy, is the experience of, hey, I think it's going to take a few hours, and I follow something, I find some resource, and I kind of achieve that. And that's currently just not possible with Nix. The learning curve is chaotic and long, and I'll talk about this later. And this is what's missing. On the other hand, we also see this. I see this connection with Docker, where it's a lot of effort actually to implement this, to put take a lot of thought into how a developer experience looks, to think about the use cases that people have, the developers have, and then kind of go from that, people's point of view back to the tooling and kind of like craft that. So going back to the survey, developer environments are the entry point. So we have like this Nix Share or Nix Develop if you're using it. But I think there's a lot of room there. It seems like this Nix Shell, is kind of like a hack that kind of grew, and it's kind of nice to have it. And we've been kind of using it in different ways, but there's a lot more out there that I think Nix could provide. If you think about Docker Compose, for example, this could be implemented with Nix in a much better way, in my opinion, or Foreman is something that I personally use. But on the other hand, I will show some example for the container world, which makes a lot of sense because Nix is a really good tool to build containers. And we kind of see these two bits actually joining because on one hand, containers provide really good runtime isolation and tooling. On the other hand, Nix provides this really, really sane way of building things. So Replit has this blog post, and they're using Nix quite a bit. So they have this blog post how they went from 50 languages to supporting basically all of them because Nix packages is one of the biggest collection of language support out there. And they're a big proponent of Nix. They have donated to Nix, and they're very loud about it and very proud. And we're very thankful for them. Another thing I noticed very recently is Nix Packs, which is this idea of taking the Heroku, how they're called, I always forget, but the Heroku builds, the Heroku packs, and kind of do the same but with Nix and Docker. And it's a pretty cool idea, which says, okay, we're gonna have this kind of like auto magic detection. That's how I understand it. That will figure out what language you're using, and based on that language will provide you the same things that you can then build your language. Be that Ruby, Python, whatever language you have. And this is done by Railsway guys, which are kind of like the new age Heroku platform. And then we see Flyo kind of adopted that very recently. This was just announced on their discourse 10 days ago that you can kind of use these Nix packs instead of the Heroku ones. So we see a lot of adoption on the containers world. And what I'm missing here is kind of like native experience. A lot of people that have used Nix kind of understand that you don't really need containers for developer experience itself. So I think the piece that's missing here is kind of uniform interface to configure any language. So whether I'm using Python, Rust, Haskell, whatever, Java, the interface to kind of like initiate a language should be kind of the same. Because right now, when you use Nix packages, every language has a different interface, and this creates a lot of cognitive load. So Dream to Nix is one attempt at this. I don't know of any others besides these containers approaches here. And I think there's like a lot of there's a big thing there that would, if we manage to solve this part, we will be able to bring Nix to a lot of people, a lot of teams, and show its power. How do we do that? It's a big question. I want to see Dream to Nix to succeed, and I'm thinking there's a lot of things to be improved, but let's see what the future brings on this side. On the macOS side, I've been personally trying to bring this to on pair with Linux, which is extremely hard. So I'll just mention a few things here. We have the Open Collective specifically for macOS right now. Tune is working for the last almost year on the SDK update. If we want to do it properly, which is through the open source packaging. It's almost done. I hope it will be done very soon. I think 80-90% of the work has been done, but let's see. And if you want to help this, if you have a company and you want to help this effort, that's great. If you're a developer and you want to do work on macOS, please also let me know. This is kind of like, it's really hard to distribute these funds, but the idea is to really kind of just fund the effort and try to identify what are the biggest issues surrounding macOS. And we have, I think about a year ago, we started a Darwin maintainers team, which consists of about 40, 50 people right now. There's just the GitHub issue link right now, but if you want to join and help maintain macOS Darwin packages, that's the way to do it. The biggest thing that's kind of missing is kind of like this nice one pager of how to get started with macOS and Nix, and this is something that I personally want to fix in the next months. So I'll share more once it's ready. But I think that a lot of macOS people would switch to Nix if it would be laid out and documented nicely for them to get started. As an alternative to Homebrew, for example. And this kind of resolves one of the survey questions or insights. All right, going forward, I think, well, as I talked 4 years ago, the main areas that I see are documentation improvement and infrastructure. So let's start with infrastructure. Since then, a lot of new things have popped up. So yeah, I'm working on Cachex, which recently added the deploy mechanism on top of the binary caches. There's nixbuild.net that supports remote builders. There's Hercules CI with continuous integration support. And there's two new, well, Flux is a new company that recently raised 7.5 million according to Crunchbase, and Determinate System, which raised 3.5, again, according to Crunchbase. And it's not clear what they will do, but for sure they are building products for Nix, is my assumption. And it's going to be interesting what they bring to the ecosystem. And my just personal feeling is there's dozens, if not hundreds, of products out there that you can build on top of Nix. And I'm not just talking about directly for Nix, but just products that one can build by just hiding Nix and saying, it's just an implementation detail, but it solves this particular problem. Because the tooling that we have is so general that can be applied to almost anything. So it's going to be interesting to see how this list grows. There's more things out there, but I didn't want to list everything that has just recently started. So yeah, this is what we have right now. On the documentation side, this might seem a bit overwhelming what's happening, but I think really big changes are happening, which are mostly important for fundamental shift again of mindset of how we look at documentation in the Nix world, which always at any open source project has been a hard topic. So I started 2 years ago Nix.Dev, which is kind of like this side that is very opinionated. It's gonna probably become less opinionated in the future. A lot of things that seem to be very opinionated back then are not anymore. And it's a collection of tutorials and guides how to get started with Nix. And this is something we've been missing in the past. And yeah, I think that recently, what I'll talk about very soon, this will expand even faster, and we will be able to hand these tutorials out to people, and hopefully in a few hours they'll be able to achieve a goal, whether that be deploying NixOS to EC2, setting up Raspberry Pi, cross-compiling, setting up development environments, and so on and so on. And well, shortly, half a year later, we had Tweag contribute. Matthew contributed the RFC to replace DocBook with Markdown, which has been great, and I think that has lowered the barrier. I myself was very frustrated with DocBook every time I had to use it because I had no experience, and it was very strict about making mistakes. And just actually this year, Valentin started the documentation team. We started with the idea of writing a Nix book, and you can read about that on Discourse, how we are trying to solely focus on flattening the learning curve and seeing, talking to people who are starting with Nix and trying to understand the problems behind that and what we need to do as a community to kind of reduce these barriers and kind of I have this phrase where I say common knowledge are things that everybody knows except you, and this is kind of the problem that I think we need to solve in Nix and try to put everything down so that others can kind of follow that path without being part of asking around and doing it the hard way. So I can say more about this, but Valentin has started an excellent Nix language tutorial. We also have really great architectural overview started by John Erickson that goes into like the concept behind Nix, which is nice to show to your coworkers how Nix really works. And on both these, this is just the initial version, so everyone is extremely welcome to. I'm speaking in name of Valentin and John, but I think they will agree to contribute back just the feedback of how things went and what is unclear and so on, because these are one of the most important documents that we need to have out there to share. And the kind of like the inspiration here is that someday Nix will be like Docker, where people will know what Nix is, but that's going to be an established knowledge across our industry. And it's kind of like the benchmark for mainstreaming Nix, in my opinion. Another extremely important, and I think this is actually the biggest shift that is going to improve a lot of things, is that the NixOS Foundation has changed its members this year. And we see essentially 5 members now in the board from different companies. So I think I cannot speak in the name of the NixOS Foundation, but as a board member, this is my opinion that first, I'm extremely happy we managed to get 5 people from different companies. This will kind of make sure that the interests are aligned between the companies and that we are like moving in the same direction without someone having too much of influence. And we will try our best to present the community. And a very common question that we had was like, why is there no people that are not from community? And it's really hard to separate to improve Nix and people that are just, one separation is CEOs and employees and so on. But we hope that in the future we will work on this and we will try to bring more people. But in the beginning, we discussed about this quite a bit, and we figured out that the people who are who have high stakes in Nix are the ones that are currently going to be the most involved in this process, because there's a lot of work to be done to even bootstrap the foundation properly and so on. Another probably talk of 1 hour, but just something to keep an eye on. And I think for community side, what's really important here is that we hear your feedback and what you would like the foundations to do, what its role should be, and yeah, there's a few things we mentioned already on this course. I'll just briefly mention them. Is we really want to support events and NixCon and things like that. In the future, we want to provide kind of like the worst case mediation role if there's some problem in community, that something is blocked on someone just disappearing or just interpersonal conflict, that the foundation will kind of be able to facilitate that or mediate it. And hopefully we will get things in order so that we will get more sponsorship and just signal to the industry, as any community out there with a foundation, that we will be there to protect the trademark and things like that, and fund the effort to improve Nix, and as previously the infrastructure that is behind and things like that, and possibly more in the future. This I think will really improve, as I said before. Just organization of NixCon and communication with community. So I'm really excited about this part. And speaking of NixCon, it's happening this year after 3 years. I think there was an online edition, but everyone talking to people, everyone said it's not the same, and it's obviously not, because it's nice to grab a beer or whatever drink and just chat with people and exchange ideas. So it's happening this year, and there's a talk. There's a call for proposals for talks, and there's also a call for sponsors. So if you want to give a talk or a sponsor, this is a good chance. And very soon, I think, I don't know exactly, but very soon there should be also a way for you to buy tickets. yeah, so that's more or less it. I think a lot of the things that we've seen 4 years ago are in progress, are moving in the right direction. Probably each of these slides could have been its own talk, going much deeper. But I hope I've showed a bit that industry is adopting Nix in different areas, and besides the companies I mentioned, I know of more that are going to come in the next months. And I really hope that even more will come and join the community. And I think we can achieve and improve Nix altogether only by expanding this to thousands and thousands of developers and seeing what everyone wants to build on top of this core infrastructure that Elko has managed to create 20 years ago, 25, 25, I think already, or 20. And yeah, just a short self-promotion. We're also having an event of Nix hacking called awesomescreens.org if you want to take a look. We are currently looking for sponsors. I think we're almost booked out, but this is already the third edition. We did already one this year and another one last year. So if you didn't manage to get in, that's okay. There's going to be another one. And yeah, at Classics, we launched a deployment service, which is kind of like, you can imagine, Nix profile deployments as a service, where you can very seamlessly and easy manage either a NixOS profile or Nix profile or any profile you want. This can be a developer environment, it can be production staging environment, and so on. So something that I'm looking forward to see what people build with. And that's it for my talk. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions, if I was too shallow or too deep about one of these areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Domen. I think it was a great talk. I will pull my colleague in here as well, Julia. So everybody welcome Julia. And then I do not see any questions immediately on either of the platforms. So I'm going to give them a little while to post questions if they want. But Julia, do you perhaps already have some questions?
Yeah, sure, I can kick it off. So one question I have for you was around, you talked a bit about Nix Shell and kind of we're looking at moving into Flakes now. Do you think there's an opportunity to reintroduce kind of the Nix model, like with Flakes from scratch as like the starting point? Or is that not super helpful, you think, to introduce Nix?
Yeah, so I think for developer environments, Flakes currently have just this Nix Shell kind of entry point. And I think there's a whole world out there that could be part of that. And I think, well, this is a general question for Flakes. I think that Flakes are great, and they kind of create this schema and like kind of like they create a lot of conventions that we haven't had previously. But I think there is a lot of opportunity for more granular approach to developer environments. So just to give you some examples, you could just have complete auto detection of languages and say, hey, just whatever language you find in my repo, just configure it the best way possible. Of course, this will not work 100% of the time, but this is something that the Nix Pack guys did, and so on. So this could be something that is just a flag that you enable. Another thing that I could see is as I said, Docker Compose, where you could declaratively define a couple of processes. That's then some process manager would start and manage it for you, but all of that will be built by Nix, and so on and so on. So I think the question for community is more like, how do we kind of create this flexibility in Flakes so that people can go and experiment and build this tooling, which is, I think, a more fundamental question for Flakes, future evolution of Flakes. That I want to open that topic, but I would first like to see Flakes released, and then we can start going into the next version.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, so there has one question come in from John Winger over on YouTube. And he asks, what has been your biggest struggle trying to create a business on top of the Nix ecosystem?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think the biggest struggle has been that a lot of people in the community are used to doing things the way they were previously, and when you introduce a new tool like Cachix and Cachix deploy, for example, in my case, people in the beginning tend to have, yeah, I have my own way of doing that. I already know how it works. The problem is that they kind of forgot through all the pain they had to go through, all the learning experience and all of that, which makes sense because they have already paid that. So the problem for me specifically is how to introduce that to people who are not in the Nix community, because they will see the value of how easy it is to start. And I see that every time people come to Cachix, for example, and they start using Nix or Nix.dev even. Most of the people are just very thankful, and I get very often thanks for that, just to follow that tutorial. So it's been kind of like, yeah, how do we bring Nix to people outside our circle? And I think for that, I'm really grateful to have these companies raise money, because they will have to go and solve this problem, and it's a very hard one to solve. And I'm really looking forward to how they will approach that. It's a lot of work.
Yes, thank you. John asked another question. Much like NixOS is a creative usage of Nix packages, are there other potential ways that you could see Nix packages being leveraged? Example given, Nix native Kubernetes-like tools.
Yeah, so Nix native Kubernetes. Well, first of all, just a full disclaimer: I have used Kubernetes in anger a few times. I'm not a huge an user, even not an expert, so I don't know. I'm not very good to have an opinion on this one. But I see that the building part of containers, Nix is still quite ahead of other tooling. There's a lot of new tooling that has come out in the last years that kind of like speeds up the process and creates a lot of solves a lot of problems that Nix does. But I think Nix is still far ahead, and I think there's a lot of opportunities out there in the container world still, and we'll see in the next year a lot of people attempt this in different ways. And for Nix packages itself, I think the biggest piece missing is like you want to have very granular control of which language version you use. Usually people, when you deploy something, it's very sensitive. You have Python 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, and then the minor versions as well. So if Nix packages right now has a policy to keep the latest ones, but I think there's opportunity to say, okay, we want to have all minor versions, because there is an actual difference between minor versions, and that would give leverage to container tools to be able to say, hey, whatever language you have, whatever you do, we can deploy this, and you will be sure that this works. Yeah, that's one angle. Of course, there's such a big world of containers out there. It's probably it's probably a lot to answer right now.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, after all, it's a pretty big ecosystem as well, if you think about it, the entire container and orchestration space. I mean, if you just look at the CNCF landscape, there's already a dozen projects on there where Nix could also like steal some market, if that makes sense.
Exactly, and I would just say this combination of this deterministic building that we have, which is something that every developer has wanted unconsciously or consciously, together with one of the biggest software distributions that we've built in the world, this together is something that is just completely unique out there in the industry.
Yep. So over on Matrix, Solan asks, when speaking about NixOS on social media, many people share their worries to use it because it would hide all the underlying system. And time spent learning NixOS can be applied to other Linux distributions, and what their previous knowledge isn't usable either. What's your opinion about this?
Yeah, that's another good question or observation. This one is hard to answer. I think as I said, like once you learn something you have already paid that price, that time investment. And it's fine. Some people will not want to learn Nix because they will just be happy with what they did and they know the pros and cons. And this is always, I think, the battle between traditional things that are known to be stable and the new things that are not there 100%, but kind of like make this gap kind of like this huge step forward. And I think that this is what I said previously, going to be a really tough job to bring Nix to mainstream. And this could be probably a separate talk again, how to approach that. But I think there's a lot of that is making it very easy to get started, supporting things that we know people want, like let's say development environments, document them really well, make sure that they work 80-90% of the time. And they shouldn't take more than an hour or two to get started. And once people try this and they will see that it works, they will start to see that the problems they had previously will go away. So essentially, the answer is reducing the learning curve and reducing the cognitive overhead that we currently have with the Nix, and that will remove that argument.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Then over on YouTube, James Brock asks, what do you imagine the most beginner-friendly Nix UI would look like?
Yeah, this is a tricky one because I think the way to approach this is to start with how developers work and what are the workflows right now, and try to go through these steps and then create a tooling out of that. Because Nix, as it is right now, the CLI was created more from, here's how Nix works, and these are the operations you want to kind of have on top of Nix, which is very different to the tooling that we know works really well. If you think about Terraform, if you think about all this command line tooling, they're usually crafted for one specific use case, one specific workflow. They solve one job. Terraform solves provisioning. That's it. And I think Nix kind of solves all of that in one thing. So I think the biggest challenge is how to create these workflows. And my bet is that this is such a big work that one company or two or three will nail this, and the community's challenge here will be what does that mean? Do we bring that back to Nix or not? And a lot of questions like that. And I don't have an answer for any of them right now, but I think it's going to be clearer once we see someone create this command line tool. But I definitely think that the new command line interface is far from what it could be to support these workflows.
Yes, thank you. Then John Winger on YouTube asks, do you feel like the transition to mainstream might be determinal? Jesus, I can't read. I'm sorry. Determinantal to the Nix ecosystem. Generally, mainstream users just consume software without much upstream contribution. Can Nix handle it?
Yeah, that's another very good question. Yeah, it's hard to say. I think mainstream always brings a lot of problems. That's for sure. That is for sure. But the way I reason about this is, imagine you invented electricity and you just kept it for your village. It would be a shame not to bring it to the rest of the world so that they can enjoy the benefits of that. And when I see, my history and everyone's history of DevOps tooling and all the pain points we had to go through, it's just very sad that's the feeling I get, to bring this to everyone and to solve these problems. And yes, of course, once we have all that capital, all those companies around, different problems that were not here before will come. But I don't think they're more destructive than anything out there. Just the consequences of a lot of people people were trying to work together, which is great. This is why I'm happy that that's structured and that we are starting to make the right moves.
I believe Domen's hotel Wi-Fi is finally giving in. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Domen, but the connection seemed to be flaky. Not in the Nix kind of flaky, but
is it any better now, or?
Yeah, it's better now. If you could give a quick TLDR of what you just said, that would be great.
Okay, let me just switch the Wi-Fi just to make sure that.
Sure.
Is it okay now, or should I switch?
It's okay for me at this moment. Is it for you, Julia?
Yeah.
It also seems to be okay for Julia. So.
Okay. I don't have a really good answer, but I think that it won't be much different than in any other, huge group of people that are trying to work together, which brings, conflict of interest, disagreements, power dynamics and all of that. But I'm happy with the NixOS Foundation and other things. I think we can go through that, and I see a lot more collaboration in the last years than before. So it really shows that we are kind of like seeing that where things are going and collaborating between companies and so on. But as I said, yeah, that will bring a new set of problems that we never had before, and for some it will be frustrating, for others it will be challenge. And as I said, like, I don't know if this was heard, but I imagine this as like inventing electricity and having it in your village. I would want this brilliant solution that solves a lot of problems for humans to go out there and that everyone can use it. And it's the same with Nix. And of course, we all know that the fact that we all have electricity brought its own set of problems, and the same will be for the Nix community, having all those people coming in. So we will just have to deal with it.
Yeah, if I could just like jump in for a second, I think you're exactly right, and I think there's this weird thing with Nix that it's not just we want all these people to use it, but Nix also like brings to the surface all the complexity of your software, right? And a lot of like tooling as it gets better is usually to like hide all those complexities and make it super easy to use this tooling. So I think there's this weird adoption curve for Nix that will happen, that will be, we can't hide all the complexities. So you're going to have this level of like dealing with the complexity of this tooling. But at the same time, we can make that road a little bit easier. So I'm not sure there's like a good historical analogy for kind of making something like Nix go mainstream. And I think its path will be pretty specific. Do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the biggest like improvement there is just creating a lot of conventions, because Nix is like a library now that you can use and build a lot on top of. But creating conventions that say 80% of people will be fine by this, making this decision, and things like that will hide or remove a lot of these decisions. Because I think the biggest problem as well in the developer experience part is just the choice fatigue that right now you have. Just, I want a package of Python package. There's just 6 different toolings for you. No problem. Just go through each of them, study how they work, and make a decision. So all of these decisions that developers have to today use, they have to go away essentially, by community or someone deciding, hey, this is the best way currently to do things, and this is where we're going.
Okay. Let's see. There is another question over YouTube again from James Brock. Do you think there are early architectural decisions which are holding Nix back? What would you refactor if you could?
Yeah. Well, I talked about this and it's been controversial, but I think imperative package management should go away, because I think every time you create this split, you say, there's declarative and imperative. There's this, then that. There's the single user installer. There's the multi-user installer. Every time you create this split, you're creating a matrix of things you have to support, and it becomes this, exponential complexity by having each of these choices. And I think that I'm not saying that imperative package management is not useful. I'm not saying that it does not have some benefits, but I'm saying that for 80-90% of use cases, we can go away with declarative ones. And for the 10-20% that is missing, probably we can create just something on top of that, or some feature on the top of declarative interface that would kind of alleviate the one in the imperative and would also solve a lot of problems. And I'm saying this mostly, probably just removing all of that up from documentation and moving into an advanced section would be a very, sufficient move, because there's a lot of problems that I think I explained in one of the Nix.dev issues. The other one is that I think modularizing Nix is going to be really important, and splitting the evaluator in a separate thing and flakes into a separate thing. So right now Nix is this big thing that's kind of very tightly connected, and I think like pulling these things apart will create a lot of innovation. And on top of that, like nar info and all these custom formats we created should be at some point replaced with some industry standard stuff, because that also removes a lot of overhead, creating parsers for these things and understanding what they are, understanding their technical flaws, and all the bits that, if you just use a format existing one, will remove a lot of that. And the last thing that I see is like that Nix was never designed to be very fast. And I think this will be really important, especially in the future for development environments. And that is a huge amount of work that I think Tweag guys are trying to solve. That's the only effort I know right now. And I think this will be a huge milestone if we can achieve it at some point in Nix community.
Yes, thank you. I perhaps had actually a personal question of myself. How do you think alternative implementations of Nix play a role in Nix going mainstream? Because you see all of these cool technologies and people get inspired by these technologies and then they start implementing their own spin on it. Do you expect this to happen with Nix as well or not?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of a healthy community, actually, because if you have an alternate implementation, that means somebody was able to reproduce that. And I think it's a sign of a healthy environment if it happens. So what Tweag's guys are doing is essentially that, if my understanding is correct. And they are extremely frustrated as far as I know, because a lot of the things are not documented or clear. But this work will kind of piggyback to Nix, I think, and it will allow us to document these things, to change them, to make them more clear. And this will kind of clean up this space, so it will be beneficial. So yeah, I do think it will happen, and it is happening, and probably should be one of the things in my talk as a sign of why we're going mainstream.
Okay, nice. There.
Are you going to be presenting at NixCon, Domen?
I will be presenting at NixCon, although I don't know what my talk should be. If somebody wants, if somebody is interested in a specific topic, I would be interested for people to hear.
Well, we had suggested an alternative title for this lecture, which was like Nix is taking over the world. But it was a bit too aggressive, we thought, so perhaps we could call it that at NixCon.
Yeah, I'll think about that one, yeah. I'll think about it. I haven't decided yet at all, but I will definitely present something.
Okay. With that, I do not necessarily see any other questions, unless my interface isn't refreshing anymore. Do you, Julia, see anything else or have any other questions?
Nope, looks like that's it.
Okay. So, yeah, Domen, I'd like to thank you very much for giving this presentation and explaining why Nix is mainstream and is getting adopted into a wider audience. If Domen is still there. I believe Domen has disconnected.
Domen has frozen. He's left the room.
Just in time. Thank you, Domen, for when you see this. Joel, thank you as well to hop in here to ask questions. Domen has reappeared, I think. Yes. Can you hear us, Domen?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yes.
I'm happy to have given this talk.
Thank you very much for giving it. Yeah, I'll remove you guys from this stage and I will wrap things up over here. Okay?
Thanks a lot.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So, as Domen has already mentioned, and Julia as well, NixCon is coming up, and they're also currently looking for people to target at NixCon. So please check out the announcement. If you have something to talk about, send in the request, and perhaps we'll be talking at NixCon, which would be very cool. If you have any questions, or I did miss any questions, or the internet has decided that the question wouldn't come through my end, please post it over on Matrix, which the link is below. Then, once again, thanks for everybody for making this possible. The NLnet Foundation, the European Commission, the NixOS Foundation, and Tweag. And yeah, I'm thinking if I should give you guys a sneak peek of what's coming up, but since I have already posted most of them, next week's talk, same time, same place, will be by Tom Barrick, or Thomas, but most of you will know him by Tom Barrick. And he will be talking about Hydra, which is Nix's CI. So I'll hope to see you then, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a nice evening as well. So I'll see you there.